Welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending the Street Transportation Department's virtual public meeting about the draft active transportation plan as we review the details of this program and the extensive document as well. And in a few moments, we will be putting up the presentation so that we can walk you through the instructions if you'd like to join us as a Spanish listener. So if we can put that up, Brandon. Perfect. So if you'd like to listen to this meeting in Spanish, we do have a Spanish translation line, and I believe that is slide number 3, if we can move over ahead. Elsie is our translator for tonight. Elsie, please go ahead and introduce the information in Spanish that everyone has on their screen right now.
Sure. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'll take a moment and introduce myself to our Spanish-speaking audience. Buenas tardes, bienvenidos a la reunión de hoy. Mi nombre es Elsie Duarte y estaré sirviéndoles como intérprete a nuestra audiencia habla hispana. Deseamos pedirles antemano que al momento de dar un comentario público, favor de hablar despacio, con claridad y evite tener distracciones de fondo. Finalmente, hago una breve pausa después de cada 1 o 2 oraciones para poder interpretarle de la manera más completa posible. Las instrucciones para escuchar la reunión de hoy se encuentran en el chat para su referencia. Nada más llame al 602-534-1000 y cuando se le solicite, ingrese el número de reunión 40392 seguido por el símbolo de número. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you, Elsie. And on the next slide, you'll see an example screen of what your screen should look like. You can see some yellow arrows and also some red circles. Make sure that you click on your own screen so that your chat box and your Q&A box open up. So take a moment, look at your screen and activate these sections on your own before we get started to ensure that you can participate with us. My name is Vivian Padilla, and I am a Public Information Officer with the City of Phoenix Street Transportation Department. I'm your host for tonight's live virtual public meeting. On your screen, next slide, you will see a list of your project members. So let's go ahead and introduce yourself as well as your relation to this project, starting off with Keeney.
Good evening. I am Keeney Knudsen. I'm the Director of the Street Transportation Department for the City of Phoenix. Our department is responsible for the active transportation plan and the development of it that you're going to be hearing about this evening.
Good evening. My name is Brianna Velez. I'm the Assistant Street Transportation Director, and I oversee the division that houses our active transportation program.
Hello, my name is Ruben Lawley, Deputy Director for the Street Transportation Department for Design and Construction Management, where the program is managed from.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Leticia Vargas. I'm a Special Projects Administrator, and my team leads this study, the Active Transportation team. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Carl Langford. I'm a traffic engineering supervisor here with the city. I more directly deal with a lot of the signing and striping, and as the bike lanes deal a lot with that, I'm heavily involved with the bike program.
I'm Marielle Brown. I'm the Active Transportation Program Manager for the City of Phoenix, and I am managing this plan on the city side.
Good evening, everybody. Brandon Gonzalez with Alta Planning and Design, and I am a project manager on the consulting side.
I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Sharifa Rowe with Collective Equity Partners here for the equitable community engagement part of the work.
All righty, thank you for that. And on the next slide, you will see a screen of tonight's agenda. Actually, we are moving over to the survey, so I will push this off over to Marielle and Brandon to explain to everyone how you can interact with us for tonight's meeting.
Okay, thank you, Vivian. So we are going to be using Mentimeter to do the survey tonight. It's a chance for us to get more feedback from you, and it's a fun, interactive way to make this meeting more lively. So please take your phone out. You will see a code or a QR code that you could use on your phone or on your laptop or on your computer to participate in the polls tonight. So go to www.menti.com and you can enter the code you see on your screen. 8527-0875, or you can take a photo of the QR code and your phone will take you right there. So we'll take just a second before we dive into the poll. Make sure everyone's connected to Mentimeter. Okay, so before we dive into the agenda, we wanted to hear from the community, and it looks like we already have people taking the polls. So the first question is, which of the following describes you? And you can check all that apply. So do you live in Phoenix? Do you work in Phoenix? Do you play in Phoenix, or other? And going back to what, if you want to use the WebEx chat, you can also tell us what that other is in the comments. And it looks like we've had at least 22 people answer the poll so far, so we'll keep it open for just a few more seconds. But it looks like we've got a lot of people who are really active in Phoenix, and that's great to see. All right, so the next question is, how often do you walk or bike? And you can choose never, a couple times a year, a couple times a month, a couple times a week, or daily. So it looks like we're getting some responses right now. It looks like we have a lot of people who bike and walk daily. That's great to see. And we also have a lot of people who are biking and walking, you know, maybe a little bit less, but it's still great to get out there and to be able to use our active transportation options. Great. So we've had 25 responses, so I think that's probably a good number. And it looks like the majority of the people here do bike and walk daily, and almost everyone is biking and walking. So we're excited to hear from you. All right, and back to you, Vivian.
All righty. So on your screen, you will see a copy of tonight's agenda. We will begin with our goals and some guidance. We want to know what you're excited to hear about today, and then we'll review the plan, objectives, and process. Then we'll introduce the community input themes to better understand how well these engagement things reflect with your perspective and your priorities. And then we will review the document and its recommendations in hopes that we learn what the biggest challenges are with implementing our network, as well as learning how you feel about the draft plan. And finally, we'll invite the public to provide their input during our Q&A session. And on the next slide, you will see how we will be handling questions. So first, we'll be taking questions from the Spanish line, if any. Then those who asked to be called on during the registration process will be unmuted. And then those who submitted questions during the registration process will get their questions answered. And finally, questions sent to us via the Q&A box will be answered. If time permits, we will open the floor to anyone who would like to be unmuted and ask a question. The chat box is where you can submit your comments. Please keep all questions in the Q&A box and comments in the chat box. Your comments will be shared with the project team and will play a role with the final document. Now that we've covered some basics, let's go ahead and get started with Keeney.
Again, good evening, and I wanted to welcome everybody who's participating in this meeting. And I want to thank my team for putting together and doing some great work on getting this point on the active transportation plan. Just from our perspective, from my perspective as the street transportation director, active transportation has become a more crucial element to how we do things here in the city of Phoenix, becoming less car-centric, making sure our streets and roads are safe and accommodating for all users, not just those who are in vehicles. And the active transportation plan is an intent for us to be able to evolve what we had previously, which is our bicycle master plan, to evolve that to encompass more people who are engaging with our roadways on a daily basis, to make sure we're designing our roadways and designing facilities to accommodate them. And the active transportation plan is an attempt to make that next step, and really to drive us forward and to cast a vision for how we would like to be able to focus on our active transportation facilities and making our roadways more conducive to people who would like to engage in an active transportation focus. So the reason why a lot of this is happening is because, you know, the city has been evolving and changing. We've got a Transportation 2050 plan, which has cast out a goal for 1,080 new bike lane miles between now and 2050. We're working towards that goal, and my team's working towards that. We also have a bicycle master plan that's back from about 8 years ago that we need to update and evolve into what the active transportation plan is today. My team has been working diligently to get this together, but that's where you come in. We cannot put together a successful plan like this together without having community involvement and your input and your commentary on what we're doing and how we're doing it. And that's what we really want to be able to focus on tonight, is to share information with you, talk a little bit where we're at on this, and be able to hear from you. So I'm not going to take any more of your time tonight. I want to turn it over to my great team, starting with Marielle, to walk you through the presentation. So take it away, Marielle.
Okay. Thank you, Kini. Thank you, Kini, for that great introduction, and thank you, Vivian, for hosting the meeting tonight. So I'm Marielle Brown. I'm the Active Transportation Program Manager and the Project Manager for the city for this plan. So I want to kick this off by talking about the plan objectives and the process, but first we're going to do another poll, and we want to hear from you. What are you excited to hear about today? And hopefully I'll be able to address some of those as I go through the presentation. Then we'll also have comments and questions at the end. So please go to Mentimeter again, and we have a poll question popping up. What are you excited to hear about today? And this is freeform. You can put in whatever you would like, and it will pop up on the screen so everyone can see it. It's a great way for everyone at the meeting to be able to kind of see what's on people's minds. So the plan is the biggest thing, yes. And also thinking about complete streets, road diet, how we will expand our bike walk infrastructure, how we'll make the city more bike friendly, protected bike lanes, how we'll make the city safer, more walkable, what the budget is, the schedule. I think we'll be able to cover a lot of these items. And what the concrete actions will be taken from a design engineering perspective, how we'll be engaging with communities to ensure equity, and also more continuous routes and a schedule for rollout. All right, so I think that our presentation will be able to address several of these, and then of course we'll have questions and answers. So the Active Transportation Plan is an opportunity for the city to update its bike master plan, as Kini said. We are doing an active transportation plan as opposed to a bike master plan because we want to make sure that we're including all the forms of human-scale transportation that we see people using on our streets. You know, we have an e-scooter pilot program with our micromobility program that will include e-scooters coming out very soon. We have a lot of interest in people walking, biking, and also using accessible vehicles. So active transportation takes a bigger perspective. And this plan is really an opportunity to figure out how do we develop our network, and how do we create a policy framework, how do we support our existing plans and initiatives, and also how do we design facilities to be more comfortable. And then finally, as with any planning opportunity, we really want to help the city budget and plan. So for this plan specifically, we really wanted to focus on identifying policy and implementation barriers. So our bike master plan was really about getting a lot of infrastructure on the ground. And this, we wanted to look a little bit more systemically at what are those barriers in our existing policy. We wanted to make sure that we were collaborating with all of the amazing work that the city's already been doing on active transportation. Our climate action plan sets goals that impact active transportation. The city's Reinvent Phoenix plan and transit-oriented development really focuses on active transportation as well. So we want to make sure we're creating connections and building on all of that great work. We also really wanted to make sure we had good design guidance coming out of this plan, that we would have that technical reference document. and then that we would also be reaching a broader group of people, that we'd really be going beyond just the people who self-identify as cyclists, but reaching people who are interested in walking and biking, and really also meeting people where they're at, especially people in historically marginalized communities. So on the next slide looks at the key focus areas of this plan. So the design guidance is that technical document that helps our designers know how to take the national best practices and standards and fit them into Phoenix streets to create more comfortable active transportation. The network development section is the element where we're really thinking of how do we build out our network in a responsive way that really builds on what we have, but also doesn't lock us into a very constrained map. And then finally, policy is that focus area that really lets us dig into what are the existing barriers that we have and what can we do to change them. So this has been a long planning process. It kicked off in spring of 2021, and like so many processes that kicked off in spring of 2021, there were some delays due to a global pandemic. But we have been able to do outreach. We were really excited to be able to do outreach in winter of 2021 and 2022, and be able to talk to the community and get feedback on what kind of strategies and priorities they would like to see. We're now coming back to you, the public, in fall of 2022 now to say, hey, did we get it right? Is this what captures your priorities and how we want to go forward? And we're hoping to finalize the plan based off of that public input in early 2023 so that we can start working on all of the goals laid out in it. So community outreach really helped to guide what's in the plan. We did community outreach in a few different ways. We reached over 500 people with our online survey. This is a brief summary of what we heard. There's far more information in the plan itself, especially in the appendix that summarizes everything we heard from the community. And we did ask people what I thought were genuinely tough questions in our surveys. We asked people, if you have to choose a trade-off between building more comfortable, higher cost facilities or lower cost facilities where you'll get more mileage, what do you choose? And if you have to choose between neighborhood routes or regional planning, what do you choose? What we heard was that people really wanted to focus on comfortable facilities over low cost facilities. They really wanted us to focus on those neighborhood routes over regional routes. And they really, really wanted to see safer, more comfortable streets. And we asked people if they would be willing to consider dropping speed limits in order to do that. And we definitely heard that people would be interested in that kind of trade-off where we would drop the speed limit to see safer streets. So we also did poster polls at 2 community events. So these were more intercept surveys. It was a way to reach out to people that might not typically be taking surveys online. So we did 2 pop-up events. We went to the Levine Community Barbecue, and we also went to First Friday and asked people these same kind of difficult questions about what do you prefer if you have to choose on cost versus comfort and neighborhood versus regional routes. And we heard similar things. People really wanted us to focus on comfortable, enjoyable facilities and on neighborhood connections. We also asked, what are your highest priorities for transportation in Phoenix and for active transportation? And we heard it was that safety was by far the biggest priority for people. They also really wanted to see connections to transit, to parks and community centers. They wanted us to focus on equity and think about use our planning to achieve equitable outcomes, and also to plan along canals. We also talked to bicycle advocates and community leaders. And so these in-depth interviews were an opportunity to get a more nuanced conversation and really dig into details. What we heard from bicycle advocates was that they really wanted to see more safety. They wanted to have better messaging around city projects, and they really wanted to see follow through on projects. Community leaders in historically marginalized areas talked about safety as well, and they had a bigger picture view of safety. It wasn't just traffic safety and lack of sidewalks, crossings, speedings. They also pointed to the need to address violent crime, drug use, and stray dogs, because that also makes the street unsafe. And they also wanted to see better accountability and transparency from the city. And they wanted the infrastructure projects to be related to the community needs and really respond to what the community wanted to see. And I just saw that we had a question about the community events where we did polling. So we did one at the Levine Community Barbecue, and then we also did one at First Friday in downtown. We were on Roosevelt Street. Right, so the next slide kind of summarizes our engagement takeaways. You know, we talked to people in different ways. We talked to different people to get kind of a variety of different perspectives. And what we heard was really emphasis on safety, neighborhood connections, meeting neighborhood needs, being transparent, and prioritizing comfort, including shade and heat. So I'm going to hand it back to you, the audience, to ask, does this match your priorities? The poll question will be popping up on Mentimeter. How well do these engagement themes reflect your perceptions and priorities? And if you need the code, it's at the top of the screen. It's 85270875. I saw that there was a question asking for that. So 85270875. Okay, so it looks like overall, we're seeing that these priorities, they don't perfectly match what the audience or what we're seeing, but fairly well. If you would like to suggest some other engagement themes, please enter them in the chat on WebEx. We definitely love to see what else we could add, what else needs to be considered. But overall, it looks like we've kind of got, at least for some people, we've kind of matched. So let's dig into the document. All right, so I'm going to do a quick overview of what the document looks like before going into recommendations. This plan is not a map-based plan. It's really focusing on policy, network development, and design. And so it's structured a little bit differently. We have the primary document, and that's an overview of the planning process. It also talks about community engagement, the high-level themes, and it talks about the accountability of how we're going to track what we promise to deliver and how we're going to make sure we're delivering it, and how we'll report it out. We then have three elements that correspond with the three focus areas of the plan: the network development program element, the policy recommendations element, design guidance, and the public outreach summary. We really wanted this format to help highlight these three areas, but it also allows us to say that something like the design guidance element, which is a technical document, has a very specific technical audience, it can be kind of shared as a standalone document, or it can be part of the overall document. So the plan has 4 guiding principles, and these are what we look to for the recommendations in each of the elements. And the guiding principles are to create equitable, safe, connected, and enjoyable networks. So when we talk about equitable, we want to make sure that we are focusing on the areas of highest need first, and then we're focusing on historically marginalized areas first. When we talk about safety, it means we want to reduce the collisions and the risk for people using our active transportation network and our streets in general. Connected networks are networks that connect people to the destinations they want to get to so they can meet their daily needs through active transportation. And it also means that the network is internally connected. that, the bike lanes go through the intersections, that there are safe crossings, that you don't get kind of dropped in the middle of your ride by the network. And then enjoyable means that the network is comfortable, that this infrastructure isn't just a way to get from point A to point B, but it's a way to enjoy getting from point A to point B. And it's something that you want to use, that you want to bring your family along to use with you. So it's beyond just a utilitarian, but something that really builds on something that the whole city can enjoy. As we were developing the plan, one of the biggest challenges was working through how do we develop a responsive way to build out our network. The city of Phoenix is very large. We're the 5th largest city in the US in terms of population, and our geographic footprint is very large. And that leads to a lot of diversity and priorities and needs. We have areas of the city that are farmland and that are quite rural. We also have a dense developed downtown. So we wanted to find a way to develop the network and to build out, taking into account all of that wide variety of needs. Our previous map-based network was static. We put out the bike master plan about 8 years ago and said, this is our vision for building out the network. What we found as we were working through building out the network is that as we are one of the fastest growing cities in the US, we're changing rapidly. And the vision of what we had 8 years ago wasn't necessarily keeping up with the vision of what people have now. As neighborhoods have changed, the people living in them have changed, and also active transportation as a field has changed. And we're seeing more and more interest in low stress, comfortable bikeways. We also wanted to make sure that as we were going through a planning process, we really found a way to work with communities on neighborhood level connections and neighborhood level engagement. So the next slide actually is going back to the poll and asking all of you, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges with implementing our network? So we want to hear from you on what challenges you see as Phoenix grows and builds out its network. Right, and this is one of those multiple choice or open-ended questions. You can say whatever you see as a challenge and it will pop up on the screen for everyone to see and share. It looks like existing car-centric development and mindset, funding, these are definitely challenges that we face, crossing arterials, cars driving through, parking on bike infrastructure, low density, people being mad about giving up road space, increasing housing density and protecting sidewalks, explaining the benefits of active transportation, momentum of change that gives people the sense of progress as the system is being improved. Current arterials don't feel safe. Not a strong and interconnected plan between biking and walking plans. Drivers not following the rules of the road and being scared of change, and then prioritizing funding for projects. Cultural and regulatory prioritization of vehicle speed, public pushback, roadway culture. Yeah, so you've definitely identified a lot of the challenges that we face. Low density of Phoenix and so many projects to work on is one thing that we definitely see every day. And there are a lot of challenges that we do have to face as we start developing this program. So I'm going to explain how we hope the network development program specifically can help us to address some of these challenges. So after working through the planning process and hearing from the community that people really wanted that neighborhood focus, what we are proposing in the network development program and in the active transportation plan is a program that will focus on developing an active transportation network for each urban village. So the goal is to work with 2 urban villages per year. The City of Phoenix has 15 urban villages, and they really come out of our land use planning process. You can see that map on your screen right now. So we have these 15 urban villages. They each have a center identified as well. And it's the way that we do our land use planning. So we are looking at using a similar scale for doing our active transportation planning. And by focusing on 2 urban villages at a time, we'll really be able to host those or dig into that kind of neighborhood identified connections, neighborhood driven priorities, and really do that kind of small scale community engagement that will help us to figure out what networks will work and make sure that we're collaborating with residents and also collaborating with other city departments and making sure we're coordinating efforts. This scale allows us a lot more manageable implementation. We'll be able to identify a quick build network that we can put in a couple of years. And it also allows us to identify larger projects that we'll need to fund for, we'll need a little bit longer to fund for future opportunities. And as we start looking at which urban villages to work with, we'll be using an equity and needs-based approach. So we'll be prioritizing the villages based on the highest needs. So this next slide goes over the process of how we're going to do this. So what we're proposing in the active transportation plan is that our first step will be to prioritize all 15 urban villages based on an equity analysis that really looks at where are the highest needs for this kind of infrastructure, where are the most vulnerable populations, who has a lack of infrastructure, and who has safety concerns as well. So after we prioritize that, we'll be working with 2 urban villages per year, and we'll start by forming a community active transportation task force of community members and community leaders from those urban villages, and then working with them to develop the outreach process, but also making sure we're working with them as we go through the steps of analyzing the existing conditions and making recommendations as well. So after we analyze the existing conditions and kind of figure out this is what we have going on in this area right now, the next step will be to go out to the community and identify those important community destinations and gaps. We'll really try to meet people where they're at, go to existing community events, and get that feedback on, hey, where would you like to see, where would you like to be able to walk and bike in your neighborhood? Using that information, the department will propose a network and will really be focused on what's that active transportation network that we can get in quickly in terms of bike lane projects. And that means like within 1 to 2 years. And then also what are some of those bigger picture priorities, longer run projects that we might need more time for funding, design, and construction. We'll present that to the community, and based off of what we hear, we'll prioritize the projects and move into implementation as we wrap up that planning process. So the goal is that we'll have a very quick implementation while we're working with the next set of urban villages to start this process again. So the community task force will really be an opportunity to get community residents, community representatives on the task force talking about what they would like to see in their community and what their neighborhood interests are. They'll also be able to help us identify opportunities for talking to the broader neighborhood and broader community, and they'll help us be able to reach out to residents to really get good feedback on our community surveys. And on the next slide, we really go into policy recommendations. So after this plan has those 3 elements. We went over network development. The next set of recommendations really focuses on policy. And this is something that these are recommendations for the Street Transportation Department to work on. The first 4 are really focused on how do we implement our existing policies and plans what are the active transportation items that will advance what we've already done, and then also active transportation in general. The plan has recommendations under each objective, and they're all prioritized into short-term, medium-term, and long-term to give you a sense of what we'll be working on first and how long we anticipate things to take. So the first 3 objectives are about existing plans and policies. So that's advancing complete streets, supporting the climate action plan, and supporting the Vision Zero road safety action plan. And then the 4th objective is that the Street Transportation Department will offer recommendations to the Planning and Development Department for the upcoming general plan update. The City of Phoenix is updating their general plan soon. That process will start very soon, and we want to make sure that we are looking for opportunities to incorporate active transportation into that larger planning process. And then on the next slide, we have the rest of the policy recommendation objectives. And these objectives are really about looking at our own internal policies for the department and updating them to bring them in line with the plan principles of safe, connected, enjoyable, and equitable transportation, active transportation networks. And these are also prioritized into short, medium, and long-term in the plan. And the final element of the plan is the design guidance. This is a technical document. We're incredibly excited to have this because it's the guidance that will help our designers design streets that are safer, more comfortable for all modes of transportation. This section also has a facility selection guide. So when we say, we want streets to be more comfortable for all ages and abilities, for everyone who might be interested in biking or walking, this helps it helps guide the people designing the street to say, okay, well, given how much traffic is on the street, given what the speed limit is, this is a starting point for what facility would be comfortable for everyone. So we're very excited to have that because it really takes national best practices and distills them into what will work for Phoenix. And then we have the accountability section. So we want to make sure that we are tracking what we're doing, that we are delivering on what we are promising in this plan, and we want to make sure we're delivering on what we've already previously promised. So our accountability section starts with some existing goals. As Keeney mentioned, through the Transportation 2050 initiative, we committed to adding 1,080 bike lane miles from 2015 to 2050. That translates to almost 31 bike lane miles per year. And we are going to continue to deliver on that. We do report every year to the Citizens Transportation Commission and to subcommittee on that. The Climate Action Plan set a goal of multi-use paths along 90% of canals in Phoenix by 2050. We are working on 2 design projects for multi-use paths along canals right now. We will continue to deliver those projects and we'll continue to report on how we're meeting that goal. The Bike Master Plan set a goal to achieve platinum level bicycle friendly community status by 2035. We are updating that to say that we are going to be, we're still going for platinum friendly status, but instead of saying we'll hit it by 2035, we are saying that we are going to apply for bicycle friendly community status every 2 years to benchmark progress to track how we get to platinum. We're adding new goals as well. So our design guidance section, this will be tracking how well we distribute it, and we'll be doing internal surveys with the designers to make sure that they're using the manual or the design guidance section. For network development, we'll be looking at starting the planning and then implementation process with 2 new villages every year until we complete all villages. And we'll also be tracking what percentage of those recommended quick build projects have been implemented within 2 years of us recommending them. And then finally, for the policy recommendations, we will be tracking what % of policy recommendations are initiated within the recommended timeframe that we have identified in the plan. So we'll be tracking these, we'll be reporting them along with the bike lane miles that we're already reporting on an annual basis. So the next question is, how are you feeling about the current draft plan? This gives you, please go to menti.com and take a moment to give us some feedback, just what you're thinking of the current draft plan. And then we'll be getting into questions and comments very soon. Okay. So it looks like we're split. There's some people who approve, some people who don't, and that's every plan. This is a draft, and that's why we bring it out to the public to hear what we can do better and how we can make sure that we get it right and reflect what the community wants to see. Great. So I think with that feedback, we're going to move into the next steps in community perspective. So community input on the draft plan, we'll be receiving it from end of November through beginning of January 2023. The draft plan was posted on the website on November 29th, and we do have a survey up. It's a very short survey, but it is an opportunity to leave comments on the plan and let us know what you think. Based off of what we hear, we'll be doing document revisions in January and February before we bring the plan to council for consideration in April of 2023. So you're welcome to take the survey, and then also you're welcome to email me or reach out to me if you have anything specific you want to talk about. So my email address is there, marielle.brown@phoenix.gov. You can also reach me at bike@phoenix.gov if you want to type something shorter. Great. So I will hand it back to Vivian to run the questions and comments portion.
Perfect. So just as a friendly reminder, if you would like to ask a question for the team to answer, go ahead and type that in the Q&A box. Please submit your comments using the chat box. On your screen, you'll see the order in which questions will be answered. For those of you who pre-registered to be called on, we do ask that you limit your questions to 2 minutes when speaking so that we have enough time to get through everyone's remarks. I do have a timer that will keep track of your time limit, and at the 2-minute mark, I will inform you that your time is up, so just please be aware of that. We do have a lot of individuals who have registered to ask questions, so we really hope we can get through everyone. Let's go ahead and begin with the Spanish language line questions. Elsie, are there any Spanish speakers asking a question?
No, not at this time.
Okay. Thank you. So now we will move to our pre-registered speakers. So just bear with me. There are several individuals. I'm going to go through our attendees to try to find these individuals. I am looking for Vance Pierce. I see that you are on with us. So I will be unmuting you, and I will go ahead and set our timer. So you should be able to speak with us now.
Yeah, my question is, why is this going to take 27 years to do this? Bike pedestrian infrastructure is exponentially less costly to build than car infrastructure, but yet it would never take Streets Phoenix 27 years to put in car infrastructure that's required.
Okay, and who on our team can answer that question?
I can start with an initial answer. So our goal is to, the network development process, our program, is going to take us about 10 years to deliver at least the quick build items. So as soon as the plan, as soon as this planning process is wrapped up, we'll be ready to start kicking off that the network development program and we have 15 villages. We anticipate doing 2 villages per year. We're thinking that the final year we'll be able to do 3 villages in that year. So that takes us through 7 years. And then after each of those villages, we do the planning process. It'll take 1 to 2 years to implement what we recommend. So that portion will take about 10 years, we anticipate, from start to finish. In terms of the policy recommendations, we are looking at a longer timeline. And that's really because as we look farther out, some of these big picture policy items are really big. They're really a lot to take on and a lot for the Street Transportation Department to say we'll be able to affect change. So we want to be careful that we are being conscientious about what we're able to do and being realistic about the timeline for some of these kind of bigger changes the plan is recommending.
Okay, and moving on, Kristen H., I see that you are online with us. I am unmuting you, and I will set the timer up as well. So Kristen, if you can ask your question, you are unmuted.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I have a lot of different feedback and kind of questions, but I'll keep it to just one, which is, has the city considered viewing hawk signals as more of a bike infrastructure item than just pedestrian? And I will say thank you to the Streets Department. I've been reaching out about different things. You guys have been helpful. And one of them was getting a couple of hawk signals near me. And it looks like one of them is already in the works. It's a slightly busier pedestrian area. And the second one, no one had requested it, but you guys were going to research. And I mentioned that I wanted the hawk signal because my bike route that I have to take is kind of unsafe. It's an unprotected bike lane with most cars going over 40. And the person from the city CC'd someone else and said, oh, I think this person can help you figure out a bike route. But actually what I was saying is putting in a hawk signal would give me a great bike route to go through my neighborhood. And then you actually don't have to spend any money on the infrastructure, cutting through a quieter neighborhood. Just, putting in that hawk signal at a major street kind of increases the options and adds a bike route that way.
Definitely, and I was one of the people that that talked to you via that email chain. So we definitely look at opportunities to use hawks along bicycle routes and bikeways. So when we're looking at how do we build a hawk, what's that kind of that warrant that will allow us to build a hawk, we do have to make sure that there are enough people crossing, but we have in the past and we will continue to look at opportunities to use hawks as ways to connect for people who are biking as well.
Alrighty, I am looking for Rebecca C., who is not online. If I see her name pop up, I will circle back. Also looking for Patricia E. I don't see you online as well. Rachel, hey, I believe you are online with us, so I will go ahead and unmute you. Go ahead and ask your question.
Hello, I just wanted to ask, I appreciate the conversation about bicycling. However, I'm a pedestrian, just full-time because I am blind. And I am wondering how I can make sure I get access to all of the information as you guys are making changes so that I can identify where some of these newer intersections are and some of the Vision Zero policies or things that you guys are going to try to put into place, because some of the information is not applicable or not accessible to me, especially when we're talking about maps. Those are things that can typically be screen read. And my final point that I hope people will consider trying to make sure that all of these plans are put into place much faster than 27 years, because almost every day I get a notification of somebody dying, being hit in intersections. So I'm hoping that people on streets can be a priority.
Rachel, I will personally contact with you. I have your contact information via email. I will send you a message and try to set up with you so that we can send that information or somehow communicate it to you in a better way. So I have made a note, and I'll make sure to connect with you. As in terms of her other question, if anybody else would like to answer that, please go ahead. All right. Oh, sorry, Mariel.
I was just going to say, so in terms of this plan, there are no maps. So, you know, Viviana and I will be able to coordinate with you on making sure the information in the plan is accessible. In terms of being able to move faster, yes, we want to move as quickly as possible. And we do have the Vision Zero Road Safety Action Plan that's really meant to address our highest crash areas and really be able to move the needle on safety, especially at intersections.
Okay. So I am looking for Z. I don't believe you are online with us. Katie P, you are online with us. I am unmuting you. Go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, I guess my question is, a lot of this stuff talks about Phoenix and living. I just moved to the Levine area about 4 or 5 months ago, and the difference in number of bike lanes that actually go anywhere and road quality from Scottsdale to this area is terrible. The roads are filled with potholes. There are barely any bike lanes that go anywhere. What type of support is going to be in these areas that are in desperate need of it? It seems like most of the money is just going to go into the communities that might be, you know, higher income tourist type places when there's desperate need in these areas. Is there going to be, you know, guarantee that we get better, you know, attention to?
I'll answer that one. This is Keeney Knudsen. When we're talking about adding or improving our active transportation facilities, namely if we were talking about bike lanes, our biggest opportunity to be able to do that is through our pavement maintenance program, and that's what we've been practicing for about the last 7 years at least, since we got our Transportation 2050 tax initiative passed, which was really focused on improving the quality of our pavement on our roadways. We saw that as an opportunity to be able to have a blank slate or a fresh canvas to be able to restripe those roadways. So we have taken the opportunity, as we've been paving more streets, to be able to create new bike lanes and to be able to improve existing bike lanes with buffers or protection. And so when we do the pavement maintenance, we do look at the quality of the pavement. So that is across the city. It doesn't matter whether it's an economically underserved area or economically well-off area. We use the pavement condition of those roadways to be able to determine who gets the pavement. So that is our biggest tool we have in our toolbox to be able to create new bicycle facilities. I would personally love to have it happen quicker, but if you know a little bit about how we are funded in street transportation or, you know, in transportation in this state, our primary resource and funding resource comes from the state's gas tax. And our state's gas tax, unlike a lot of other states, hasn't been adjusted or increased since 1991. So if to move things quicker, whether it be street projects, bicycle projects, the quickest way is to be able to get additional resources into us, and we do our best to be able to manage the resources and the funding that comes to us. And that's why we end up using the pavement maintenance projects that we have to be able to create new bicycle facilities. So that's the biggest detriment to us moving quicker and having those connected networks. It really is dependent heavily upon the pavement maintenance schedules and pavement maintenance locations where we do those street projects. So I apologize that I don't have anything better to tell you for that, but that is really a resource-driven constraint.
Alrighty. So we are moving on to Ryan B. You are online. You are unmuted. Go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you. So my big question here is, will this plan be applicable to the entirety of the Streets Transportation Department or just to the active transportation? And then as a kind of side follow-on with this, I ask this mostly because there's going to be probably a scenario in which you may have a level of service complaint from one side versus, actually putting in infrastructure that prioritizes pedestrians over the motorists. So how are you going to deal with those kinds of conflicts after this plan is passed?
That's a great question. The plan has 3 elements. The design guidance section it's not a mandate to build these facilities, but instead it's a technical document that supports how to build these facilities. That will be shared with every division in the Street Transportation Department, most specifically the project managers that oversee our capital improvement projects, and then also our traffic services division will certainly be using that as a reference, and we'll be making sure they use that. The network development program, that will be something that the active transportation program leads, and we'll certainly be leading the work. The policy recommendations, as you go through them, are really department-wide policy recommendations that we will be working to see how we implement these things across the department. And I think that your question about how will we identify these priorities, how will we kind of evaluate and negotiate these priorities is something that we will be developing in the planning process. So as you look at our policy recommendations, we talk about how we are going to be looking at not alternative, but additional ways to kind of evaluate what the benefits of projects are, and kind of figuring out how do we weigh that in the overall decision-making process. And also what additional data do we need to collect. So that's not something that's going to take place like next year, but it is something that is in the policy recommendations elements, and it's something that we hope this plan will support working through and changing that or updating that decision-making process.
Alrighty. I don't see Tiffany online with us. I do believe Daryl, you are with us. Daryl M., you are unmuted. Go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, thank you. So my question and my point just has to do with, I want to encourage you all to steer away from half measures with this implementation that can be dangerous. A few examples is there's a bike lane on Oak, east of the canal that I use. I'm glad it's there, but it's shared with on-street parking, and when cars are parked in it, it forces me into traffic, which can be dangerous on my bicycle. I love the improvements to the canal, but several places along my commute cross business access points and cars turn in and out of there, and I've had some unsafe situations. There are hawks installed along the way, and those are great, but cars don't stop for the reds, especially the flashing red. Once the first car goes through, they all go through. There were bike lanes installed along 40th Street, leading from the area where I live down towards the light rail, which is great, but it stops at the most dangerous point, which is at the freeway. So I'm seeing a pattern in our implementation in this infrastructure of we're doing it and we're trying, but when we reach an obstacle or when we get in danger of inconveniencing drivers, the city's making unsafe decisions with that infrastructure, or it isn't going all the way. And what are we doing to ensure that the infrastructure we're building is safe and continuous, and people are comfortable using it? Because, I mean, I'm pretty bold and I use it, but it's hard for me to encourage others to when there's issues like this. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for those comments and those questions. It's certainly connecting the infrastructure is certainly something that this plan takes seriously, and something that I personally really wanted to work on figuring out. So one of the reasons why we're excited for the network development program is that it will allow us to plan at a much smaller scale. So we'll have that kind of ability to really pay attention to fine-grained detail and really make sure that we're making those connections. It's also a scale that will let us do more community engagement and really make sure that as we're proposing these, we're getting that community buy-in and support for being able to negotiate those difficult trade-offs, because as we do get pushback when we start removing traffic lanes. So we're hoping that by scaling to somewhere where we can really focus on the connections and really focus on community engagement, we'll be able to better address those real challenges in terms of connectivity. And I did want to note that on the 40th Street, that is an ongoing challenge because the city of Phoenix right-of-way does not extend under the Arizona DOT facility. So when we go under or over freeways, we have to make sure that we're coordinating with ADOT, and sometimes that is a longer-term process, but we were hoping to get the bike lanes in with the pavement project so that we can start looking for how to connect under the freeway as well. We're very aware of that challenge.
All righty, and Kieran G., you are with us. You are unmuted. Go ahead and ask your question.
Hi. I was, in reading through the plan, I didn't see a lot of discussion about the costs of the different types of infrastructure or funding sources or the total amount of money that the streets department is planning to spend on this. And I was wondering if you could speak to that. One thing that I thought would be useful, for example, is in the biking design guideline section, where you talk about the different types of infrastructure, you know, just kind of including ballpark costs of each one would be very useful. The most successful plans that I've seen have, you know, included a robust discussion of, you know, running calculations of how much things cost and then identified sources for funding it. So I was wondering if you could speak to those issues.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a great comment that we can look at including cost estimates in the design guidance. In terms of funding, so the Active Transportation Program is funded for almost $2 million per year. And then we also kind of stretch our funding by working with the Pavement Maintenance Program and putting in bike lanes, you know, when we're restriping the street anyway. So it's more of a marginal cost as we add those bike lanes. And we will continue to be funded, and we believe that the Network Development Program will be able to, by working with 2 villages per year, we'll be able to implement within that, you know, almost $2 million budget. We also will be adding an additional staff member to the team. The hiring process is ongoing to help with coordinating and implementing the plan because we do have a lot of work headed our way with this.
All righty, and those are all of our registered speakers. Again, I really appreciate everyone still holding on with us. We're going to go through some of the registered questions and then we'll go through the Q&A box. So we have not forgotten about you. We will get to you as soon as we can. Carson is wondering, are there any designs or plans to have an interconnected network of protected bike lanes? The third Ave track is awesome, but it still feels like there's a lot of work to be done.
Okay, so right now the city is working on extending that path or the two-way protected bike lane north. So we are looking at how do we continue it north. We've put in kind of quick build protected bike lanes on 3rd Ave a little bit farther north with a pavement project as well. This active transportation plan, we don't have that traditional map of like, this is where our protected network will be, but we will be working with the urban villages kind of in an iterative way so that we're identifying the network and identifying how we can build it out as we go through planning with each urban village or at the urban village scale. So right now, no, we don't have that full map of this is where we're going to go, but we'll be looking for those opportunities as we work through the network development program.
Adam S. is wondering, the plan looks well-rounded and ambitious. Which project goals do you plan on prioritizing to work on first, and which are more secondary goals, things that will be done later?
So that's a great question. So we have 3 elements, and they're all going to be implemented on a different timeline. The design guidance is something that really, you know, as soon as the plan is finalized and approved, we will be sharing that and using that as a technical resource document immediately. So that will be, you know, kind of once plan's approved, we're implementing that section of using the design guidance. For the policy recommendations, there are timelines identified under each objective. So you can go through the document and see, you know, what we are planning on doing first, second, and third. The goal is that within each of those objectives, you know, there are all the short-term goals. We'll be working on all of them across the board for those first few years before we move on to medium term and then long term. And then in terms of the network development program, we'll be starting work on that as soon as the plan is approved, and we'll be working with 2 villages per year. So, you know, we'll be prioritizing the highest need villages first, and we'll be actively working on planning and implementing the networks for them as we move to the next villages and the next and the next. So we'll be working on all of these elements on a different timeline, but they'll be, at least for policy recommendations, we do have kind of those goals set out for when we hope to achieve everything.
Howard K. is asking, there are many areas in North Phoenix where roads have not been improved and therefore lack a bicycle lane or even a shoulder that can be ridden on by a bicycle. Is there a plan to address this gap? And additionally, Vance had submitted a question saying that this plan seems to be focused on central downtown Phoenix. What steps are being taken to create complete and inclusive bike infrastructure in Laveen? So 2 questions about creating more bicycle infrastructure or addressing this gap in Laveen and in North Phoenix.
That's a lot to answer in one question, but I'll do my best. I think the first part is, although it may seem like this is focused, there are different areas. It might be focused on the core of the city. I will tell you that our requirements when new roadways are being built, especially by developments, is we have standards in place that allow for improved bicycle facility, active transportation facilities, that actually provide space for even buffering bike lanes. So when you're seeing new roadways being built in North Phoenix and even in Laveen to some extent there, we are incorporating those requirements in there so we can have those bike facilities in there. When you're talking about the core of Phoenix, that's where you have a lot of streets that are already built out to their ultimate width. So there, for example, you're not going to be widening a Thomas Road or a 35th Avenue to be able to fit those facilities in there. So it's trying to work on ways to be able to improve bicycle facilities within that core, and how do we focus in on doing that? So that's a built-out environment where we're trying to look for those opportunities to be able to make safe, active transportation facilities. But outside of the core, we have more of space, we have more ability, we have the ability to work with development as it's being built out. The third part in there, which is kind of both of those, is that what we'd call a scallop street, where you have streets that have been developed, but maybe were developed decades ago. And those were built at a standard that isn't the same standard as today, where you might, and it's also where you may have hopscotch development that has occurred, and you have a certain width of a roadway in a certain portion of a road, and then you go down a half mile to the east and it now shrinks down because there hasn't been development in there. Those scallop streets, we're working on a policy right now to be able to implement scallop street, a policy that will help give us the ability as a city to be able to go in and make improvements to those roadways, and then also have the ability to lean back to property owners who are adjacent to that if they decide to develop those properties and sell them off and develop them into homes or in whatever it might be, or commercial businesses. Because that's one of the real detractors for development going in a lot of those, is because they're going to have to do those offsite improvements, those half street improvements that would include curb, gutter, sidewalks, landscaping, street lighting, and widen out the roadway to be able to create those bicycle facilities. If we go and do it, then that would get, if we, through a scallop street policy, we'll have the ability to go in and actually charge back to those properties if they go and develop within a certain time frame. So those are different ways that we're looking at being able to tackle that problem, but it does relate back to when you're talking about improving some of those roadways that don't have the infrastructure for bike lanes or even a stripe. The main reason, as I go back, and I don't mean to keep on harping on the resources, but it does come down to resources. Our ability to go in and be able to do those projects is having funding enough to be able to support those. I think there was a question in there about having whether the state mandates how the gas taxes apply to the state level. The main focus of the gas tax, when it is the only requirement is to be used in street or public right of way. But you got to realize that money is there to help us maintain the infrastructure we have and also build on new infrastructure. A lot of portion of that is to be able to keep the main infrastructure we have into good condition, whether that's pavement, whether that's upgrading our signals and keeping that technology current. So I know there's a long answer to that, but that gives you some of the challenge that's behind the scenes of why building out the active transportation network, even though we have these goals, it does take time to be able to do this, and it doesn't go to the speed we'd like it to on the staff side, and I know it doesn't for a lot of the advocates in the community. But the key for me and our staff is to be able to make sure we're charting a course that we can use all available measures that we have to be able to create those great safe bicycle facilities and active transportation facilities.
Alrighty, thank you, Keeney. That was very informative. Moving over to Nick, he is asking a very curious question. How can we get a rebate going on active transportation purchases to encourage more active transportation usage? Denver, for instance, provided up to $1,200 to residents that purchased e-bike and e-cargo options last year and is doing it this year as well. Mariel, I know you had mentioned a little bit about this previous to the start of the meeting.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. So this is a question that I know that on the staff side, some of us are asking too. We do have in our Office of Sustainability, we do have a program working on electric vehicles and how to promote electric vehicle usage, which includes e-bikes in the city of Phoenix. The contact for the program is Karen Apple, and it's really the Office of Sustainability that would be taking the lead on this issue. But I absolutely agree with you that what Denver is doing is amazing.
And our last registered question is from Joelle. I started biking in the city of Indianapolis, and one of the great things about the trail system there is that from downtown outward, almost every single trail could be accessed via protected or off-street bike lanes. Are there plans for that here?
Hey, that's a great question. I have been to Indianapolis several times. It's an amazing bike city. I think people don't realize that Indianapolis is really becoming one of the best bike cities in the US right now. So we are looking at, through this active transportation plan, we're looking at how do we develop out our network. And so we'll be working with each urban village to identify those connections to existing or future trails and what kind of infrastructure will work with them. So we don't have something like the Indianapolis Trail System planned right now, but we will be looking at how do we build out our network. We do have a separate plan going on right now for a downtown north-south bikeway. So we will be looking at different types of infrastructure for that. I would anticipate protected bike lanes will definitely be something we're looking at, and so that will be a downtown location. We're also looking at, we have committed to building out our canal network. So while Indianapolis has great rail trails, we have the opportunity of having really great canals. So we have an existing canal network, and we will be building out multi-use paths along that by 2050. So that's kind of our equivalent, I think, of their rail trails.
Okay, so now we are exploring some of the questions in the Q&A box. I am scrolling through. Nick is wondering if it's determined that there's a larger project that needs time to build a budget for, when would that community then get revisited?
So the goal is that, we'll be working with communities and we'll stay in contact with the communities. We don't want to just go in and then come out. So once we have the recommendation, like that this is a high priority project, but it's not something that we can build quickly because it's too big, too expensive, too logistically challenging, we'll be continuously working on how do we push that project forward. and we'll stay in contact with the community. So we're definitely looking forward to building those relationships and being able to check in with the community continuously on how we're moving the identified projects forward.
Drew is wondering, the target is 30.9 miles per year. What is the current average?
It's just over 30.9 miles per year. So we are exceeding the average or exceeding the goal, but I don't want to give you the wrong number off the top of my head.
Okay.
But I can tell you that we're ahead of the goal.
I'll just build on Mariela's answer there. If we do actively track the bicycle lane miles that we create each year, and that's actually reported in our Transportation 2050 annual report. So we do track that because we know that's a major goal, the 1,080 bike lane miles over the period of time the Transportation 2050 will be in place. Sorry, Vivian.
Oh, no, thank you for that. I'll be sharing that link on our chat box. So Drew, you can check in a couple of seconds for that. Kristen, I know you had asked a question about the city reviewing the lighting along the canals. One of our team members did respond back to you. She was just wondering that oftentimes she finds that lights are often out. The canals are a great way to get around. We did let you know that unfortunately some vandals do repeatedly compromise the lighting that we do install. We are programming repairs and looking for alternative solutions that might be more vandal proof. If anyone else on the team has a more detailed answer, please jump in. If not, we'll move on to a next question.
I'll just add in there, the lighting I think that probably is being referenced as this being vandalized. It's actually a bollard style lighting, and the reason why we've had to use bollard style lightings is because the canals are primarily a utility corridor, both for the water that flows through the canal, but also for electric utilities that have power lines through that stretch as well. So when we're putting the pathway in there, we have to maintain a certain distance and deal with the space constraints on the canal. And some of those space constraints don't allow us to put traditional overhead lighting on the canal. And so we've had to go to bollard style lighting, and that is more susceptible to vandalism and damage from people who are not interested in having lighting there. So that's something we're working through. We're trying to get to a permanent solution on there to be able to have something that's durable, but also provides safe lighting in those stretches where we have to use that type of lighting.
Thank you, Keeney. I do recall that we've answered Vance's question about the duration of this project taking 27 years. Mariel, you did address that. Scrolling through another question from Kyle, can we have a stretch goal to complete 3 to 5 villages per year?
That is a great question, and it's something that we talked about internally quite a bit. The reason we have 2 as our goal is because we really wanted to make sure that when we were going out to the communities and saying, this is what we're going to do and this is what we're going to implement within the next couple of years, that we were able to deliver on that. So we looked at our capacity not only for community engagement and planning active transportation networks, but also our capacity for delivering them. And that includes our crews that will be striping the streets and making sure that we have enough project managers to manage putting in new, any new infrastructure that's needed. What we found is that we really have the resources to do 2 per year. We right now don't think we have the resources to do 3 per year. We have never tried anything like this before, so I do want to be upfront that, maybe we will surprise ourselves and we'll get more in than we anticipated. But we did look at what we kind of, ballparked how many miles of bike lanes will each village get and set a goal for something that we know that we can get in the ground. Because if we're not able to get it in the ground in those first couple of years, when we go back, the community will say, hey, well, that was like 4 or 5 years ago. We need to plan again. And we really want to be able to deliver on what we're planning instead of going into that loop of having to do another planning process and falling further behind.
Kyle was also asking about gas tax. Keeney, I do recall that you did answer that. Kristen, is wondering, would the city consider updating the typical e-bike speed listed in the plan, currently 10 to 15 miles per hour? I think it should be 10 to 20 miles per hour. I regularly go 20 miles per hour, and my e-bike is pedal assist only.
Yeah, we can definitely look at updating those numbers in the design guidance.
Another canal question, Kristen is asking, will the city consider signage for the canals, noting them as bicycle routes? The canals are greatly underutilized. This would be an easy way to market them to passerbys. I was previously told that too much signage is distracting.
So we actually have an active project right now to add some signage along the Grand Canal to identify it as for bicycling. And we do also have a policy recommendation to look at long-term, how do we create a more cohesive, unified approach to wayfinding signs in the city of Phoenix, and that would include the canals. I do want to note that adding signs along the canals is challenging because they are utilities, and we do have to make sure that we're working with multiple partners following really strict guidance about what can be near the canal. So we are dealing not just with our own right-of-way and our own sign standards, but also partner agencies as well as we look at those changes.
Next question is from Daniel. Will streets collaborate with the Planning and Development Department to encourage the removal of single-family zoning and minimum parking requirements in order to make Phoenix more walkable and stop exacerbating the urban heat island effect, which this plan identifies as a key barrier to active transportation?
Not sure. I don't know if you want to take that, Marielle, or.
I'll just start off by saying we do have a set of policy recommendations that we are offering to the Planning and Development Department to look at how they can support active transportation in the general plan update. It does not include all of the items that you listed, and I'll hand it back to Keeney.
Moving to a question that Dave T is asking, what happens when there is strong opposition to reconfiguring a street, as what happened with Central Avenue and Van Buren from 7th Street to 24th Street, and Central Avenue, that project was Bethany home to the canal?
I think I would say, answering it more generally, is the fact that we are evolving as a city, and the conversation about making more space and investment in facilities that make it safe for people who are not in vehicles, that are interacting our roadways and are more vulnerable road users, that is evolving. And the adoption of Vision Zero and the adoption of the Road Safety Action Plan and other things that we've been working on, even incorporating the bicycle lane goals within Transportation 2050, those are all signs that we as a city are moving in a direction that is more accommodating. And so what I would say is we're always looking for opportunities to have wins, to have successes. And I always say, things like when we had conversations about Missouri bike lanes, or we had North Central Avenue bike lanes, sometimes those are still good projects, but the timing isn't right on those. So we're always going to be looking for being able to be successful in here. And so sometimes that's a matter of understanding the timing may not be right for this one because the opposition is there, but it doesn't mean that we can't get there eventually. And so, and a lot of people want us to move quicker and hit those areas and just roll over them. But I think sometimes, from my standpoint, it can do more harm to our movement towards a more safe active transportation facilities than good, because if we create a groundswell of opposition to what we're doing, then that can take us off course as well. So I'm always looking and working with my team and working with the public to be able to identify those ones that we can move forward on and be able to be successful. And that doesn't mean we're going to be successful every single time, but we want to make sure we are doing it in the right way so it doesn't create an obstacle to doing more in other areas of the city, because we are a big city, 520 square miles. We have 5,000 miles of streets, And one project is not going to make or necessarily make or break us, but it could potentially, if we implement the wrong way, it could create opposition that keeps us from going towards on our goals. And that's what I want to avoid. I want to be successful in getting more safe, active transportation facilities out there on our roadways.
Perfect. Laura is confused a bit about the schedule, Mariel. Maybe you can help clarify. She is asking, does the first pair of villages have to wait until the end of the full 7-year period to see the beginning of quick implementation of new facilities for their villages?
Yeah, definitely. It's a little bit confusing. So we'll be doing the quick implementation as soon as that first year of planning ends. So, in year 1 of the program, we'll be doing 2 plans for 2 villages. And then in year 2, we'll be working on implementation of those plans of the quick build projects for those first 2 villages, while also starting planning for the next 2 villages. And then, in that year 3, we'll be working on implementation, wrapping up for the first 2 villages, implementing for the next 2 villages, and then also starting planning for the next few villages. So it's a lot of work for our department, but we will be looking to do that quick implementation as soon as we wrap up the planning process, because we want to get it in a way that responds to what we hear from the community.
And Nick is wondering on that same note, how can we get more resources to accelerate this plan? Are we talking a prop to raise the gas tax, or is there any other path to accomplish that?
Now you're gonna get me in trouble when I answer this question. I think what other cities, or what other states have done is they've adjusted their gas tax, whether that's to be able to accommodate the fact of inflationary pressures on what's gone on with the cost of building and maintaining our roadway infrastructure, our transportation infrastructure, or accommodating some of the things that as we've developed within our fleet system, that we have more electric vehicles out there that don't use gas the same way. They don't pay for the utilization and the wear and tear on our roadways like other vehicles do. So other states around the country have adopted changes to their fuel tax or gas tax, whatever you want to call it, at the state level to be able to accommodate those things. We have not done that here in the state of Arizona. And so I've always said to anybody who wants to know, to do something faster, whether that's building a roadway, whether that's building more bike lanes, whether that's doing more technology projects and changing out more signals to make them more better technology, all those things I could use, our department, the Street Transportation Department, the City of Phoenix could use additional funding through the gas tax. And that's at the state level. That's not a decision we can make here at the regional level or even at the local level. That's something that's only controlled by the state legislature and the governor. And on that, I'll say the other thing I'll say is, at the local level, we've done some things. We've done Transportation 2050. We've created a 0.7 sales tax to be able to support public transit and also street transportation projects. We have a regional sales tax that accommodates freeway, roadway, and transit projects as well. It's called the Regional Transportation Plan. Prop 400 is what it was called back about 20 years ago, and they're looking to be able to re-up that. So there are things we've done at the regional and local level to be able to help fund projects like this and active transportation projects and funding at the local level for transportation. The state is where a little bit of that hasn't happened, and like I said, since 1991.
Thank you for that. And then moving on to our last question of the night, how does the Rio Salado play into this plan? In my mind, it is our future bicycle highway.
I guess I'll answer that one because one of the great grants we just received a RAISE transportation grant from the federal government, $25 million, to help create a dedicated bicycle pedestrian bridge across the Rio Salado. One of the components of that project, we didn't get it fully funded, but one of the components was to be doing significant upgrades to the pathway, the Rio Salado pathway along the south bank of the Salt River. And so that does play in here. So us being able to create active transportation facilities and just like the Grand Canal and the Western Canal and the other canal projects we have, those are all wonderful opportunities to be able to create safe, active transportation networks that don't necessarily cause you to come into conflict as much with cross traffic and vehicular traffic. We have those safe crossings at those locations, but it provides a great opportunity to be able to have a long connected network that has minimal interaction with the traditional vehicle on your roadway. So those are all part and parcel of the active transportation plan, and be able to do more out there to be able to create those that infrastructure for more safe active transportation. Thanks.
Thank you, Keeney. And we can move over to our last slide. We do want to thank everyone for participating. I know several individuals have already logged off. Go ahead and go to our webpage, phoenix.gov/streets/ATP to take the survey. Mariel, can you inform everyone when the survey will be closing?
Yes, thanks. So the survey will be closing on January 8th. So please take some time to read the plan, to offer your comments. We definitely want to hear what you would like to see and how we can make this a better plan for all of Phoenix.
All righty, and with that, you can see on your screen the contact information for Mariel Brown. She is our project manager for this. Her email is mariel.brown@phoenix.gov. You can also email our bike address, which is bike@phoenix.gov. Again, that web page is phoenix.gov/streets/ATP. We want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. We appreciate everyone's input, and we look forward to reading everyone's survey results. Thank you so much for joining.